I'm 75 now, and I can't remember anybody except the Queen bee.
The private state dinner was supposed to display royal unity. Instead, one whispered sentence about Queen Camilla caused a senior courtier to stop mid-step, Prince William to lower his glass without taking a sip, and King Charles to stare silently across the table. Hours later, palace staff broke rank and revealed exactly what had been said. Camilla's authority would be restricted, and Catherine would be consulted before several major family decisions. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. The dinner had been arranged as a private state gathering at Buckingham Palace, meaning an invitation-only royal event for senior family members, visiting dignitaries, and a small circle of trusted staff. No cameras were present, phones had been restricted, and every guest had been reminded that conversations at the table were not to leave the room. That secrecy mattered because one uncontrolled sentence could damage family trust and expose decisions the king had not yet explained. Camilla noticed the reaction before she understood the message. William placed his glass beside his plate with deliberate care, while Anne exchanged a brief, controlled glance with Catherine. The Queen watched them both, and realized the people nearest to her already knew something she did not. Her position had not changed publicly, yet the silence around her made the private shift feel immediate. Camilla turned towards Charles and asked quietly whether the whisper concerned her. The king did not answer. He adjusted his cuff, lowered his eyes, and allowed several painful seconds to pass. His silence carried more weight than denial. She understood that whatever had been said was not careless gossip. It was connected to a decision he had already approved. A staff member later repeated the exact wording through a recorded internal account. The Queen will retain her dignity, but the Princess of Wales will be heard before the future is decided. The sentence protected Camilla's title while limiting her influence over William and Catherine's household. It also gave Catherine a formal voice in major decisions affecting the monarchy's next public chapter. The leak was no accident. 3 staff members separately confirmed the same conversation, using nearly identical wording. That consistency suggested someone wanted the arrangement known beyond the dining room. Suspicion quickly fell on the senior aide standing behind Camilla's chair. He left moments after the whisper, and was later seen speaking urgently beside a service corridor. But before the palace could discover who had carried the secret beyond those gilded walls, Camilla had to confront the far more painful truth that the people seated closest to her already understood why the decision had been made. Behind the titles and polished smiles were 4 people trapped by completely different fears. Camilla feared humiliation after spending decades fighting for acceptance. Charles feared that protecting his wife could weaken the crown. William feared that silence would endanger his family's future. Catherine feared becoming the symbol of another royal conflict. At the center of the dinner table, their private anxieties collided without a single voice being raised. Camilla felt the old insecurity return. She had spent years moving from public rejection to institutional acceptance, yet the new arrangement suggested that her position could still become conditional whenever William's future reign was discussed. Institutional acceptance meant recognition by the palace, the family, and the public that she belonged beside the king. Now that acceptance appeared secure only until the monarchy looked beyond Charles. William carried a different fear. He believed the independence of his household was essential preparation for kingship, because divided instructions could weaken authority before he ever reached the throne. Catherine understood the same danger, but greater power offered her no comfort. She knew that accepting a stronger role could make her look as though she were replacing Camilla before the current reign had ended. Catherine noticed the Queen's hands tightening around her napkin. The princess did not appear triumphant. She lowered her gaze and remained still, as though she wished the secret had never reached the table. Camilla saw that discomfort, but pain made kindness difficult to recognize. In that moment, Catherine's silence looked less like sympathy and more like guilt. Camilla finally turned to William and asked whether he had requested the change. The prince paused before answering, then said, "I asked for clarity." His controlled tone carried a firm message. He would not apologize for protecting Catherine, his children, or the structure of his future household. William had chosen restraint, but restraint did not mean weakness. Anne understood exactly why the request had been made. A documented internal account showed that she had helped draft the new boundaries after months of staff complaints about competing instructions from different royal households. The Princess Royal's calm reaction proved the whisper had not surprised her. She had expected the decision. She had helped shape it. Charles had approved the arrangement days earlier, but delayed telling Camilla. The king hoped to explain it privately after dinner, believing the appearance of unity would prevent conflict. Instead, his silence allowed the truth to arrive as humiliation. As the final course was cleared, Camilla leaned towards Anne and asked, "Was this your recommendation?" The princess did not deny it. She set down her spoon and said, "It became necessary." Those 3 words did not begin the crisis, they exposed a wound that had been deepening for months. Ever since one private ceremony became the point of no return. The state dinner whisper did not emerge from a single disagreement. Its true beginning lay months earlier, inside a smaller palace chamber, during a ceremony so controlled that even most senior staff never learned what happened. Catherine had been asked to approve a program involving young members of the royal family. Before she could answer, Camilla spoke in her place, and one sentence transformed an uncomfortable pattern into an open struggle over authority. The tension had been growing quietly. Advisors from Camilla's household had begun involving themselves in events connected to William and Catherine, changing invitations, redirecting charitable appearances, and issuing instructions that left staff uncertain about who held final authority. A royal household meant the private office, advisors, staff, and responsibilities attached to a senior family member. When those boundaries blurred, confusion became more than an administrative problem. It threatened discipline, loyalty, and trust. Catherine repeatedly chose compromise. She adjusted schedules, reassured anxious aides, and refused to complain in public because she knew any disagreement with the Queen would be turned into a contest between 2 royal women. Her restraint protected the family's image, but it also allowed the pattern to deepen. Each quiet concession made the next intrusion easier. The point of no return came during a private investiture planning ceremony at Windsor Castle. An investiture is a formal event where the monarch or another senior royal presents honors to people recognized for service. Catherine was asked whether George should attend a sensitive engagement connected to the program. Before she could answer, Camilla said, "That decision will come through the Queen's office." Catherine did not raise her voice. She looked directly at Camilla and replied, "Decisions concerning my children come through William and me." The room fell silent. A junior aide later recorded in a confidential staff account that the princess kept her tone controlled, even as her fingers pressed tightly against the table. Her calm carried more force than anger. Charles heard every word. He ended the meeting early, dismissed the staff, and spoke privately with Camilla. Yet the king avoided creating formal boundaries, hoping the tension would fade if handled quietly. That delay only made the next clash more likely. Anne reacted differently. She began requesting written records of occasions when one household attempted to direct another. Those documented incidents later became the foundation of the arrangement whispered about at dinner. Weeks later, Camilla learned that Catherine had spoken privately to Charles and warned that the confusion could not continue. The Queen did not hear a request for order. She heard a challenge to her standing. By the night of the dinner, every restrained disagreement had been compressed into a single unbearable moment, and Camilla was no longer willing to remain seated while others decided what her role would become. The confrontation began so quietly that several guests continued speaking. Camilla placed her napkin beside her plate, turned toward Catherine, and asked whether she believed the Queen had become an obstacle. Catherine's face changed immediately. William leaned forward. Charles closed his eyes for one brief second, and Anne remained completely still. In that instant, the private dinner ceased to be a royal performance and became a family reckoning, years in the making. The surrounding conversations began to fade. Guests noticed that the senior royals had stopped eating, while a footman paused beside the doorway, unsure whether approaching would make the tension worse. The musicians continued in the adjoining gallery, but the careful mood of the evening had already fractured. That mattered, because this dinner had been arranged to project unity. Instead, everyone close enough to hear was witnessing the collapse of it. Camilla demanded a direct answer. She told Catherine that whispers, memoranda, and household recommendations had been allowed to speak in her place. A memorandum was simply a formal written note used to record advice or decisions inside the palace. The queen said she wanted no more careful wording. She wanted to know whether the princess truly believed her influence should be restricted. Catherine refused the accusation. She said she had never asked for Camilla to be humiliated or stripped of dignity. Her concern was clarity, especially where her children, her charities, and William's constitutional preparation were concerned. Constitutional preparation meant the private training, responsibilities, and planning required before the future king eventually takes the throne. Catherine's voice remained controlled, but the pain beneath it was unmistakable. William intervened when Camilla accused him of treating her as temporary. The prince moved his chair back and looked directly at her. He said the issue was not her marriage to Charles. It was the boundary between the current queen's household and the family preparing for the next reign. He would not allow confusion around Catherine or the children to continue. Camilla turned to Charles and asked whether he had authorized the change. The king finally answered, yes. One word ended every doubt. She stared at him, visibly stunned that the decision had been made before she was told. Anne then revealed the evidence through a documented internal review. Contradictory instructions had caused cancelled appearances, confused security teams, and distress among staff. The princess said the recommendation protected every household rather than punishing one person. Camilla rose, pushed back her chair, and told Charles, "You should have told me before everyone else knew." Then she walked out without waiting. Her departure looked like defeat, but behind the closed doors of the palace, another battle had already begun, because the true power did not belong to the loudest voice at the table. Camilla's anger dominated the dinner, but the decision had been shaped elsewhere in private meetings, handwritten notes, and carefully documented failures. Charles had signed the final instruction, yet he had not created it alone. Anne supplied the evidence. William demanded separation. Catherine insisted that no one be publicly humiliated. Together, they formed a quiet alliance, whose influence became clear only after Camilla discovered that the decision could not be reversed by emotion. Charles still held ultimate authority over the current reign, but William controlled the daily operation of his own household. A royal household meant the staff, schedules, duties, and private office attached to a senior member of the family. The conflict began because Camilla's advisors had treated her senior rank as permission to cross those boundaries. What looked like protocol from one side felt like interference from the other. Anne gave the arrangement credibility. She had no interest in ceremonial rivalry, and no desire to strengthen Catherine simply to weaken Camilla. Her reputation rested on discipline, duty, and practical judgment. That allowed the Princess Royal to present the crisis as an operational failure caused by confused instructions, not as a personal attack on the Queen. Charles remained seated after Camilla left. Staff quietly guided the guests into another chamber, while the king stared at the untouched dessert before him. He admitted to Anne that he had delayed the conversation because he could not bear another period of conflict with his wife. The monarch had tried to preserve peace, but his silence had turned a difficult decision into a public wound. Catherine still argued for restraint. She asked that the arrangement remain internal and rejected any wording that might make Camilla appear defeated. The princess insisted that the queen's public role should remain respected, even while the limits of her household authority were made clear. Catherine understood that order without dignity would look like punishment. The instruction itself was firm. Camilla's office could no longer alter schedules, charitable priorities, staff appointments, or decisions involving George, Charlotte, and Louis, without approval from William and Catherine. The same document also gave the princess formal consultation rights over major choices involving the monarchy's long-term public strategy. Consultation rights meant she had to be asked for her judgment before those decisions could move forward. Anne requested the original papers after dinner. A clerk then discovered that one additional copy had been made, and its number did not appear on the official distribution list. Someone had duplicated the instruction before Camilla ever left the table. By sunrise, the palace was no longer trying merely to contain a family disagreement, it was hunting for the person who had turned a private settlement into a public weapon. Before breakfast was served, the secret had moved from the dining room to 3 editorial offices. Palace phones began ringing while staff were still arriving through the side entrance. One newspaper possessed the whispered sentence. A broadcaster knew Camilla had walked out. Another source had described Charles's one-word admission. The monarchy now faced a nightmare more dangerous than disagreement itself. Someone had recorded every emotional fracture and released them in the most damaging order possible. Senior communications staff were summoned before dawn. Entrance logs were reviewed, phones were collected for inspection, and everyone who had worked near the dining room was ordered to provide a written timeline. A communications office is the palace team responsible for handling public statements, media pressure, and reputational crises. This leak mattered because it exposed not just a decision, but the exact sequence of pain around it. Reporters knew far too much. They knew where each royal had been seated, that Camilla had challenged Catherine, and that Charles had confirmed the arrangement with a single word. Someone had not simply passed on policy. Someone had rebuilt the dinner as a public humiliation, moment by moment. Camilla received the morning briefing alone. An aide placed the papers beside her, and the Queen read the first page without speaking. She removed her glasses and asked, "Did he defend me after I left?" The aide hesitated. That pause gave her the answer before any words did. Charles entered carrying nothing. The king asked to speak privately, but Camilla refused to look at him. She said the leak hurt less than discovering he had allowed her to learn the truth at a crowded table. He tried to explain that he had wanted to avoid conflict, yet his silence had created something worse. Betrayal, in front of witnesses. Security records then exposed the first serious suspect. A senior member of Camilla's own communications team had entered the service corridor immediately after she walked out. The aide had previously warned that limiting the Queen's authority would be interpreted as a public demotion. The motive became clear through a documented internal briefing. The leak had been designed to force Charles into reversing the arrangement. By making Camilla appear humiliated, the source expected the monarch to defend her publicly and restore her influence. Camilla surprised everyone. She did not demand a reversal. She instructed her private secretary to identify every person who had received the stolen information. Her voice remained steady as she said, "No one will use my name to damage the king again." That decision marked the first change in Camilla's response. But it would take one unguarded conversation with Catherine to transform anger into something neither woman had expected. There were no secretaries, advisors, or husbands in the room when Camilla and Catherine finally faced one another. The Queen stood beside a rain-streaked window, while the princess remained near the closed door, unsure whether she had been summoned for another confrontation. Instead, Camilla asked a question stripped of rank and ceremony. "Did you want me removed?" Catherine's answer did not erase the hurt, but it ended the misunderstanding that had made every earlier conversation impossible. Camilla had requested the meeting that afternoon and ordered every aide to remain outside. She also insisted that Charles and William not be told until the conversation had ended. A private sitting room was simply a personal palace space used for confidential family discussions rather than official business. That privacy mattered because both women needed to speak without husbands, staff, or titles shaping their words. Camilla carried the deeper fear into the room. She felt her life had become a cycle of being accepted in public, while never being fully trusted in private. Catherine carried a different wound. She feared that every attempt to protect her children or support William would be presented as ambition, as though duty itself were proof that she wanted someone else's place. Camilla asked whether Catherine saw her as an obstacle to the future king. Her voice broke slightly when she admitted that the dinner had made her feel like a guest at the edge of her own husband's reign. The Queen had spent years reaching the center of royal life, only to discover that the future was being organized beyond her reach. Catherine answered without hesitation. She had never wanted Camilla removed, weakened, or humiliated. She wanted the freedom to raise George, Charlotte, and Louis, without instructions arriving from another household. She also needed William's preparation for kingship to remain clear, because divided authority could damage both the family and the crown. Catherine then revealed something Camilla had not known. In a private recorded conversation with Charles, she had personally asked him to protect the Queen's public dignity in the final wording. The princess had rejected an earlier draft, describing Camilla's influence as a problem requiring correction. She had demanded boundaries, not disgrace. Camilla fell silent before admitting her office had overreached. She had confused protecting Charles's reign with controlling what came after it. The admission did not erase the pain, but it ended the denial. Before Catherine left, they agreed to appear together at their next engagement. Camilla said quietly, "Let them see that the boundary is not a war." Their private understanding could not erase the leak, but the image they chose to present would determine whether the public saw a monarchy collapsing or finally correcting itself. By midday, the country expected another royal rupture. Broadcasters prepared split-screen debates, newspapers printed language of betrayal, and crowds gathered outside palace gates, waiting for a visible sign of division. Then Camilla and Catherine stepped from the same car. There was no forced distance between them, no separate arrival. As cameras surged forward, Camilla placed one hand briefly against Catherine's back, and a single photograph overturned the story the leak had tried to create. Television coverage had already described the dinner as the most serious internal dispute of Charles's reign. Commentators asked whether the monarchy was shifting emotional authority from Camilla to Catherine before the current reign had ended. Emotional authority meant the public trust and influence carried by the royal figure people increasingly looked to for stability. That question mattered because power inside the palace could survive a private argument, but public confidence could not survive the appearance of a family at war. Buckingham Palace issued a brief statement saying royal households regularly clarified responsibilities. The phrase referred to the separate teams, duties, and decision-making structures attached to senior members of the family. The palace denied any change to Camilla's rank, yet it did not challenge the central truth. William and Catherine's independence had been formally protected. Camilla looked through the car window at the waiting cameras and asked Catherine whether she was ready. The princess answered, "Only if we walk in together." Neither woman pretended the pain had vanished. They simply refused to let someone else use it against them. Catherine slowed her pace as they approached the entrance, allowing Camilla to step forward first. The gesture rejected triumph. The princess could accept responsibility for the future without turning the Queen's present position into a public defeat. Camilla understood what Catherine was offering and placed one hand against her back. The Royal Chronicle captured that moment. Its next front page carried the image beneath the full-width headline, "Boundaries, not banishment." Crowds outside Buckingham Palace raised copies above their heads while broadcasters replayed the gesture. The story of humiliation began to lose its grip. Palace investigators then identified the leaker through access records and documented communications. A senior aide from Camilla's office had shared the details, believing public anger would force Charles to abandon the arrangement. The Queen approved the aide's immediate dismissal, refusing to protect someone who had weaponized her pain. That evening, Charles summoned William, Catherine, Camilla, and Anne to his private library. No intermediaries would speak for them now. For the first time since the dinner, everyone entered the same room, knowing the truth, and Charles understood that his final words would define not only Camilla's place, but the character of his reign. Charles did not sit behind a desk when the four royals entered his library. He stood beside the fireplace, holding the document that had caused the crisis, and admitted what no palace statement could disguise. His silence had allowed confusion to become resentment. He had tried to protect Camilla from pain, but instead denied her the dignity of hearing the truth directly. What followed was not a punishment, a surrender, or a victory. It was the monarchy finally choosing clarity. Charles confirmed the final arrangement without hiding behind careful language. Camilla would retain her full ceremonial position, public responsibilities, and role beside him. A ceremonial position meant the official duties, appearances, and public standing attached to her place as queen. Yet her household would no longer issue instructions affecting William and Catherine's family, staff, charities, or preparation for the next reign. That boundary mattered, because divided authority had already damaged trust and confused those expected to serve the crown. The king then recognized Catherine's future responsibility. She would be consulted on long-term public strategy involving the monarchy William would one day lead. Charles made clear that she was not being presented as a replacement queen. She was being prepared to support the next sovereign, just as her husband was being prepared to carry the crown. Charles turned towards Camilla and apologized. He said the decision had never been designed to diminish her, but admitted that withholding it had exposed her to humiliation. Learning the truth during a state dinner had made the queen feel betrayed before the very people expected to respect her. Camilla accepted responsibility without resistance. She admitted that members of her office had crossed boundaries, and that her determination to protect Charles had sometimes become an attempt to control circumstances that belonged to William and Catherine. The queen did not demand revisions. She accepted the arrangement because defending her pride now would only reopen the conflict. William answered with respect rather than triumph. He told Camilla that defining authority did not erase her place within the family. The prince thanked her for dismissing the aide responsible for the leak, recognizing that she had chosen the crown's stability over the instinct to protect herself. Catherine finally crossed the room and placed the signed document on the table instead of leaving it in Charles's hand. She said, "Then we begin again, with everyone knowing where they stand." Camilla quietly agreed. The state dinner leak exposed a monarchy weakened by avoidance, but it did not destroy the family. It forced Charles to speak honestly, Camilla to release authority that was never hers to carry, William to protect the future without cruelty, and Catherine to accept responsibility without humiliation or triumph. Unity had not come from silence. It came from boundaries, honesty, and shared duty. The whisper that threatened to divide the monarchy ultimately achieved the opposite. It ended the confusion, closed the conflict, and left every royal with a clearer place beside the crown. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.